So good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can see my shared screen with the guidelines for today's webinar. We have set it up so you can only see and hear the presenter as well as a couple committee members of TIPA. As such, just please use the Q&A function if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. Antony will either try and answer live if it's appropriate, or we will cover questions at the end. The chat function has been disabled just so it doesn't keep popping up on your screen during the presentation, but I will reactivate it at the end. Also, just so you know, this is being recorded to make it available to others afterwards. So before Antony begins, we just wanted to introduce who TIPA are, for anyone who's unfamiliar. So the Twin Ports area is home to a diverse group of early career researchers in a variety of fields. Unlike other academic communities, however, our postdocs and graduate students are somewhat scattered among their departments and institutions. So TIPA was formed in 2016 to help foster a community for researchers and scientists who are going through similar transitions in their careers. We have organised a full forum and a spring symposium yearly, including career development activities and a panel discussion on topics such as how to gain funding or working outside of academia. We also try to have members of the community give 5 to 15-minute presentations on their research as often as possible. So owing to the current situation, we have had to move our spring symposium to a virtual platform. And this actually ties in very well with the topic of online presence. And with that, I'm just going to hand over to Nate, another member of the committee, who's going to introduce today's speaker.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Nate Polash. I'm a postdoc at the US EPA here in Duluth, Minnesota. And it's my pleasure to introduce Antony Williams to the group. So as we were thinking about what are some of the things that people, especially early career researchers, are interested in, the idea of how do we best utilize the web and all of the various platforms on there to sort of promote our science and share what we're doing was a topic that was of interest to many, many people. And so I attended a postdoc conference down in North Carolina, which is where Antony lives. And there I got to see Antony present on this topic. And I thought it was an amazing presentation. And so I reached out to him and asked him if he would be willing to come and share that with our group up here. And thankfully he agreed. And so, yeah, so I'll let Antony tell you just a little bit about some of the various things that he does with the EPA, and then we can listen to his presentation on how we can use the internet, use some of these resources that are online to share our science and share what we're doing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Antony.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay, great. While I'm sharing my screen, a little bit about myself. I've been at the EPA for 5 years as of May the 1st. I'm definitely in the latter stages of my career. Some of my history is I'm an analytical scientist by training. I've worked in national labs in Canada. I've worked as a chief science officer for a software company, ACD Labs. I don't know if any of you know them. I built a website called ChemSpider, which put tens of millions of chemicals online and 100,000 users a day. And then I worked for the Royal Society of Chemistry in publishing as they bought the ChemSpider website. And then I joined EPA. And at EPA, I am responsible for something called the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard. Some of you may have used it. It is our offering to the community for approaching 900,000 chemicals with access to toxicity data, property data, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole different presentation, but if any of you are using the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard, then that is actually my project. So today I want to tell you about something that I got very interested in, specifically because I got into a little bit of a blog war with a scientist when I built ChemSpider and put it online out of the basement. We got attacked in the blogosphere, and a lot of criticism directed at what we were doing. And just to be clear, this was a hobby project. So I was working during the day, and then between 10 o'clock at night and 2 in the morning, with a friend of mine. We were putting millions of chemicals online just for fun, just to use the technology, see what was feasible. And I got quite a thrashing in the blogosphere, and I was not on a blog, and Twitter didn't exist. And there was really no way to address the commentary that was coming at us. So I was dragged kicking and screaming into the social network of blogging, and I had to diffuse and address a lot of the comments that were coming. As a result of that, a number of the people who were originally attacking what we were building ended up on my advisory panel for ChemSpider. They became close friends, and I saw the power of social networking. With time, Twitter came along. I thought 140 characters was stupid and irrelevant, and we know how wrong that is, because that can swing stock prices in just a few characters nowadays. It moves news very, very quickly, and certainly Twitter's become very powerful. So even I call things wrong on a fairly regular basis. But I'm going to tell you today about a number of sites that are available to you. Everything I show you is free of charge. Any of you can use it. I've certainly derived benefits out of these sites over the years. Despite where I am in my career, I believe that if I'd had access to these at the early stage of my career, I would have been able to really embrace the possibilities of sharing my data, sharing my science, and building up a profile. So at the top of the screen, if you notice, there's an arrow that just showed up. And if I was in a room with you all, it's very difficult to do this with everybody sitting at home and sipping coffee, watching this. I would ask for a show of hands regarding how many of you have orchids. Generally, the room offers me a response of a few hands. Many people do not have orchids. I would say that by the end of this presentation, hopefully you will see the benefit of this. This is the Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. Many publications now are expecting this. I happen to put it on every presentation that I give. So when I put a presentation up online, that orchid will be extracted, and it will therefore be indexed, so that if I use that orchid ID, it will find this particular presentation online when I post it. It will do the same for every data set, because I include my orchid with my data sets. It will do the same for publications where I ensure that I provide orchids. So orchids are important, and I just want to point out that you have a way of making everything you present accessible because it gets indexed. If you wish to take notes, that's great. This is being recorded. All slides will be made available, so you can have them later. I will show you where to pick them up and download them and reuse and repurpose as you wish. Everything I do is on this is simply a giveaway to the community for people to use and get value out of if you wish. And I'm also willing to help you afterwards. This new situation we find ourselves in, what else do we have to do except for take care of our house, our kids, animals, and answer emails? Maybe the occasional Netflix video. There are various versions of this talk. If you please take a look at my name, there is no H in Antony. That is a common misperception. So if you look at slideshare.net, you will find all of the talks I've given over the past few years. I think I have 400 there at this point, and there are various flavors of this one that are already there that you can download. Every presentation I give on the dashboard, every poster I deliver at conferences, CTAC, ACS meetings, whatever, I put all of them online so that people can download them. There is also a related publication on F1000 Research, open access. You can get it for free if you need it. It's called The New Alchemy. I'm a chemist, so I'm still struggling to plastic into gold, but at least we can do something with the social networks to try and take advantage of them. So this is an article that's a couple of years out of date now, but it does tell you about the systems that are out there, the potential to get benefit from them, and how to embrace them should you choose to. It is already out of date for sure, because new systems keep coming online. Every few months there's something new and exciting. So show of hands is difficult, but this is the presentation I would give. How many have you have an orchid? Feel free to raise your hand to yourself and acknowledge yourself. I'm sure many of you have used LinkedIn and have a profile there. I would guess, based on the number of times I've given a talk like this, that many of you have not got your own materials on SlideShare, but may have actually seen slide decks on SlideShare. It's not the only place to have PowerPoint slides, for sure. And depending on where you are in your career, the answer is some of you, none of you, but I'm at the other extreme. I've got 250 publications and book chapters, etc., etc. So the reason I ask that question is because you put so much work into publishing, you want to make sure that you do the work to market it. And I'm going to tell you some of that story. And then some of you may be very cautious because of where you work about how much work you could share online. But if I told you that it's already public because you put your posters, your presentations, your slide decks up onto the EPA websites, as soon as it's public, then you have the choice as the author. You can take a copy of that and put it into other places. So I ask you the question, if you consider how much stuff you've done already in your career, whether at EPA or before you came, whether you've been given presentations internally at university, anywhere in your PhD, maybe first postdoc, how much of that finds its way out to the public eye? How much work do you do to make sure that people see what you do? That question commonly is people don't do much work. And it's actually, I see it as your job to become, you toot your own horn. And this is the same comment that was made by a gentleman from NC State here in Raleigh. He says, it's not the job of researchers to become experts in public relationships, blah, 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 blah. But he does recommend the scientists toot their own horns as well. And I totally agree. Nobody else is going to sing your praises and tell your story as well as you can. So I hope by the end of this presentation, you get some encouragement to participate. I'm going to show you some, but not all of the tools. There are way too many. I'm going to give you some stories, stats, and potential strategies to morph and modify as you see fit. I'm going to encourage you not to do this just for yourself, even though there is rather a selfish aspect of this, if you like, to build your own profile. I can guarantee you that out of this will become some benefit for the overall community, as people may end up using your data, being aware of your work that they didn't know before, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the outcomes, I would hope, if you don't have an ORCID, you already have one. A couple of hours a month on your profile, and there may be a number of profiles you bring up. Once you've put in the initial work, once you've crossed the initial activation barrier, then maybe a couple of hours per month on your profile. I'm not sure how many of you watched The Tiger King, but that was probably the biggest waste of time I've had in months, but encouraged to do so by my girlfriend. So I participated in that. I would rather have been working on my profile. And that you have a bigger impact online. So the social security number for scientists, as I call it, the ORCID, this is mine. It is a unique identifier for me. It now shows up on publications. So that F1000 article I showed you had this little green icon saying that all three of us had ORCID IDs. It is labeled against individual presentations, publications, if you choose to do that. Publications, the publishers themselves are requesting it in many cases. Sadly, the publishers are not following through the way I would like. Generally, many of them will take the ORCID ID of the primary author, the communicating author. They do not work hard to take everybody's IDs. And if you are involved in a publication, whoever is the communicating author, I would encourage you to make sure that the ORCID IDs go on the publication. These ultimately will then link back to your ORCID profile. And the ORCID profile itself is the orcidid.org and a simple hyperlink. So publishers are requiring them, but as I said, you need to follow through, make sure that yours gets up there. It is indexed everywhere, so Google is the primary port of call for many of us, of course. It's now a verb to Google it, of course, has been for years. So if I search for my ORCID ID, it will bring up my ORCID page at the top. I actually attached the ORCID ID directly to my Google Scholar Citations page. It got picked up by Academic Karma, which is a website that I know nothing about personally. Academic Karma takes the open data from ORCID and populated another page on my behalf and came up with some richer visualizations of the data and hundreds of more results, publications, presentations, reports, open access reports, preprints, everywhere that I put that ID. So it is if I want to know on any given day who out there has my data, I can go in and push this up and show. So again, put it on your presentations, put it on your posters. So everybody that I work with at CCTE, I encourage them to put their ORCID ID up on the poster template. I'm not sure everybody is doing that. I would say please do it, because it will attach to you as the author. And again, here's an example of the ORCID ID directly on my Google Scholar profile. Google themselves, I've talked to the people who built Google Scholar, and for them, the ORCID ID is still too small a signal for them to actually offer you a place to input that into your profile. It will come. When I originally had the conversation with them, they had only 100,000 out in the world, 100,000 ORCIDs. On Pi Day 2 years ago, it crossed 3.14 million. So it's probably approaching 4.5 to 5 million ORCID IDs. So the signal will be big enough for them. Google also indexes all of your works, even through the images. So I told you that I put my ORCID ID onto all the presentations, and you can see here totally different templates. So the one on the top left, let me see if I can get a laser pointer to show up here. So here, this is an RSC publication, presentation, and this was posted in Slide Player. There's my ORCID ID. This is RSC. These are EPA presentations, these 4. So you can see that they show up because they have the ORCID ID associated with it. So again, there are tens of my slide decks indexed on Google. So now let's think about the work you do as researchers and to publish a paper. So likely hundreds to, if not thousands of hours of work goes in, not only by yourself, you're rarely a single author. So all of this work done by all of these researchers, then you write the publication, then you put it in for peer review, then you deal with feedback, and we know how wonderfully supportive the peer review process can be in some cases. It can be really beneficial in some cases. It can be really dress you down. Either way, you deal with it, and you push out another version, and maybe you go through another version of review, and finally this thing will make it out, and you will have done hundreds to thousands of hours of work with yourself and your colleagues. It will end up being a publication, and then people wait, and they wait for citations and people to say good things about it, connect the work, and it is a major representation of your work. Certainly when people ask for your CV, they want you to list all of your publications. So if you want to make your work discoverable, even though it's indexed online by these engines, if you really want to make it discoverable, put more work into making it discoverable. Point fingers at it, hang flags over it, throw parties around it so that people can find it. And I encourage every member of authorship to put work into pushing it out into the social networks. I have a number of colleagues who think that's of no benefit at all, no interest. They're not going to do that. They're moving on to the next and best thing. And we've all got many projects underway. However, there's nothing bad to put into giving it an hour to 2 hours, multi-touch marketing, to share it via Twitter, via LinkedIn, etc., etc. Think now of a presentation that you give in a small room where you speak for 20 to 30 minutes, how much work you did to do the science, write the slide deck, get it through the review, fly on a plane, stand in a room of somewhere between, it could be 50 people, it could be 500 people, commonly not that many. And that room is it. That's all of that work is seen through that presentation. So if you share it online, then you can pick up a much larger audience, and sharing it via a social network can do that. We don't just do presentations, and we don't just write publications. We create research data sets that may be supplementary info to a publication, or maybe not. Maybe it will never be attached to a publication. You choose not to publish it, but that research data set can have value in itself. You've got the software that many of you write, whether it's R code, put on GitHub, or some other form of software that you're going to make available for people to use. Why not? You've done the work. You maybe make it open source, share it with the community. Of course, publications, posters, and presentations we've talked about. You've got theses yourself at this stage of your career, and hopefully your thesis is available online. Film and audio, this is a recording. So if this is associated directly with my ID and is publicly available, so it can be shared, then people can hear this talk over and over and over again. And many of the presentations that I give about the dashboard that we build are then put online, so that when people join us at CCTE, I can say, go watch that presentation on YouTube or wherever. But that will get played many times. And my only caveat is make sure you're allowed to share. Don't share things too early. You work at the EPA, don't push things out that you don't have permission to. But in general, you will find that the agency will embrace that once it's already released in other ways. LinkedIn is the most basic career tool. I use it for anybody I'm interviewing, anybody. I am already looking at their LinkedIn page to find out how much do they share, what have they done historically, and a minimal effort in LinkedIn, to me, is a very bad representation of the work you've been doing. It doesn't mean that you're not a great scientist. It doesn't mean that you haven't done good work. It doesn't mean that you care about everything you do, but it is a representation of you to the community. And I can guarantee you, having worked with HR groups, they are going to go here and they are going to source information about you regularly. If there are 5 or 6 resumes that come into me, I am going to go to LinkedIn and I'm going to build a profile of you in an Excel spreadsheet that includes publications, presentations. I will go on Google Scholar. I will see whether or not you've set up a public profile. I'll go to Dimensions, etc. I'll go to these various sites and see what you've been posting. This is my primary project. Hopefully some of you have seen it. This is slightly out of date. We're about to release another few thousand chemicals in June. When I work on this project and we release publications or new data sets, then I go onto LinkedIn and I highlight the project. So you can put this information up here for people to see. So they're aware, and it goes out to the network, and people will share it within the LinkedIn network. They'll give it a thumbs up. A thumbs up builds your expanded network of connectivity. And it can be within a day that something I have released and updated on the project has 1,000 views. So that's 1,000 people who have taken a look at the update, and hopefully will have navigated over to see what's changed. This is an article. So when an article gets published, I also add this to my LinkedIn profile. I certainly have not gone back through history and listed everything from the late 80s all the way through the 90s, because what I was doing that far back in my career, pretty irrelevant to what I do today. So I do manage this, and I remove things off as they kind of decay, and I add things on as they're published. So articles can be published here. LinkedIn still isn't dealing with DOIs, and that's a great shame. As I said, they get networked. So this was done over a couple of days. There were 397 views of me posting about a release. I posted the presentation, which you can see here, to SlideShare. I'll tell you more about that shortly. So posted the presentation, pushed it up, gave it a couple of hashtags, and then people were resharing it and viewing it, and hopefully looking at this release update so they could see what was new. You can also use it to get recommendations. You want recommendations from your peers, from people who manage you, who are scientists you network with. Don't use this for connecting to your hairdresser, etc. That's to their benefit, likely not to yours. So make the request directly, and you can prune the recommendations as they come. This is an older screenshot, but it's related to endorsements, so how people see you. And we used to say that if 6 people tell you you're a horse, saddle up, because it's not how you think of yourself, it's actually how the community sees you. And in this case, 99+ people think I'm a chemist. Correct. I am analytical scientist, analytical chemistry. Correct. I'm going to skip drug discovery for a moment. NMR, yes. I'm in science, cheminformatics, yes. But this drug discovery, I've never worked at a drug discovery company. The last drug I found was an aspirin that had fallen off the kitchen counter. But I have written in journals about drug discovery. So I guess that's where that annotation came from. And these represent your skills. And these are also where people have endorsed you. So very useful. And if you put the work into doing this, then you can create a single PDF file and dump your entire LinkedIn profile out to a PDF file. They've done it really well. I think my PDF file off of LinkedIn is something like 80 pages at this point. I think this one in those days was 48 pages. So that's one heck of a way to manage everything in one place. And keep it up 2 hours a month across your profiles, and then one button click and you have it. This is where I put my presentations. If you notice left-hand side, this is LinkedIn, who owns SlideShare. LinkedIn is now owned by Microsoft, multi-billion-dollar purchase. SlideShare was acquired by LinkedIn themselves, and it's because they saw that people who have careers are giving a lot of presentations, and they wanted a path to allow people to share. So this is where I put my talks after I've given it. This is the August 2018 ACS Fall meeting in Boston. There's the ORCID ID, consistency. Putting things onto SlideShare, you can then browse through and you can look at views and statistics. So in this case, this is fairly old now. This is 358 slide shares. I had 270 followers. But so occasionally your slide deck can make it to the front page of SlideShare and you can get thousands and thousands of views. I told you that I commonly give presentations in a room. There may be 50. I've given presentations to 500, but that is so uncommon. So again, you're giving talks to very small numbers of people in general. But what happens when you post it and you end up with 2,500 views, 24,000 views, 5,000 views? And all you've done is taken the 2 minutes of a presentation that's been shared already via an EPA website, and you're posting a copy to your own profile. And your own profile now can connect to your own CV resume so that people can go and look at all your slide decks. So this is a show of the 1 month of views. This is, let's see when this was, what year? Probably about a couple of years ago. So 3,000 views in a month. You can see at a daily level, maybe 100 views a day. Now I do have a following, I do have a profile because I built to make that happen. Oh, this was in 2019. That's 1 month, and you can see which ones are of top interest. You can even look at the geographical map of who's interested in what. And then over 1 year, this was 84,000 views in a year. So those presentations were probably given to a few hundred people in a year. I tend to give a lot of presentations, a lot of webinars, etc. But when you can get close to 100,000 views a year by putting them online, those are eyeballs that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. SlideShare is not just slides, it's documents, it's videos, infographics. You can see those all listed across the top. So every open access article, I download a copy and I put it up here. Preprints, I put up here. Documents of interest that I've written and chosen not to put elsewhere, I put up here. So take advantage of the platform. And we at CCT, we also use Figshare. Now Figshare is available for all of you to use. I'll give you more details about your setting up a personal account. But CCTE, we pay for the privilege of putting our information here. So while I put it on SlideShare, I also put it here on Figshare. And if I search now on my ORCID ID, then you can find every presentation that's been given by CCTE that has my ORCID ID involved on the record. So you can see everything there. And as I said, posters. Put it on posters, top right-hand corner. That's the profile that I normally use, is poster ID, date, place, and then I add the ORCID ID in my email. I encourage you to do that. That means that anyone can download this. This is at 114 views, 34 downloads, and it's got my ORCID profile built into it. So DOI everything. Our data sets that we put up online, So the poster itself, in this case, also has a DOI. That DOI is fully referenceable through Figshare. So your CV can also have direct DOI links built into it for people to find your posters, to find your data sets. And you're bringing it all together by using those issue DOIs. No site is necessarily permanent, including things like Google Sheets. But I find, because I can move things quickly between Google Sheets and Excel, and because I'd like an easily accessible version of my entire list of publications and presentations and data sets available, I've set up a Google Sheet, which is publicly available to anybody and most useful to me, with every article I've ever published accessible via a link to the DOI. So anybody now in the world can go download that site. If they were interviewing me, they have immediate access to everything I've done. But to be honest, I do this for me. So anywhere I am, I can go on an iPad, a computer, a public computer, my own, and I can find everything that I would like about my own articles. Also, many people have heard of ResearchGate. Some people have chosen not to use it because of the amount of emails they get from it. I would encourage you to use it and switch off notifications so you don't get inundated with emails. This is a very nice site. I knew that person, Ajit Madish, when he sent this up initially. I was building ChemSpider at the time. It was very, very early in building ResearchGate. They got some funding from Microsoft. They got some funding from German government. I think they have well over 100 employees at this time and been incredibly successful. This is where I also add information. You can see where I work. You can see what my role is, whose lab I'm in, my colleagues. And you can also see citation counts. Research interest is kind of a count of, it's a profile count for yourself. It's also represented here with this numeric value. I always when I was 39, I always wanted to be a 42 because it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. If any of you are Hitchhiker's Guide fans, but it kept going. I wish it stopped at 42. People give you recommendations on here. They read your articles, and all of these statistics count for you. You don't only just put articles and presentations on here. Of course, you have all of these possibilities, including things like negative results, which I think are great, methods, cover pages, code. It's a great place. And of course, ResearchGate, they're making money off your data. Don't know the details of how they do that, but they are allowing people to advertise to you job positions, etc., etc. So they're not a charity, but the benefits outweigh the loss to them making money, in my opinion. It's a great site. I like using it. This again is where I manage the project, Comtox Chemicals dashboard. I update things. I add updates like this, put links into the PDF file so people can find it, and then that gets counted. Also, all of the publications that we issue, I add those publications. And then these statistics do represent you. So you can see how many people are reading about the project, how many people have read my questions, and how many people have read answers to other questions that I've given on the ResearchGate site. How many people have read the publications. You get regular emails telling you what's going on with your account, whether people are using what you do, and you do get jobs that you might be interested in. It asks you to improve your profile. So if you publish and you haven't positioned a new update regarding a presentation, it says, is this you? We found a publication that matches your name. Would you like us to add it? And so it helps you maintain your own account. And I think it's very good. They also ask you to help build the network, again, to their benefit. So in this case, one of my ex-colleagues from my days in commercial software, Andre Erin, certainly authored this publication, and they're asking if he's an author with you. The same happens to all of your co-authors if they have ResearchGate profiles. So you're all helping to build relevant meshed profiles to elevate yourself and to also elevate the networkability of the site. If you get too many emails, just go in and block them. They shouldn't become a distraction. I actually cannot remember the last email I got from ResearchGate. It's that infrequent. There's another site out there called Academia. I set up my own profile on Academia because I met the person sat next to me at a scientific conference and introduced themselves, because in those days I was known as Chem Spider-Man. Not Peter Parker, but Chem Spider-Man. And he'd seen what I'd been doing in the blogosphere and in Twitter at the time, and he asked me to take a look. It's a very nice site. It's not as connected to science, in my opinion, as ResearchGate. So great to use. Many of the same capability as ResearchGate. I do not have the time to populate both, but I did for the time in my career. I did have time. And you can get some good statistics on measure of access. So this is about 3 or 4 years old, but 21,000 views then. It's probably doubled by now. And then on Twitter, via Twitter, I was in the top 0.5% of all academia users. Data sharing, you could put the data into ResearchGate, you could put it into Figshare. This is where we put data sets also for the EPA Figshare account. And you can see here, every time we publish data sets, we try to do them in a format that not only do they become supplementary info files that might get dumbed down to PDF files, which I think is really wasteful and damaging to a data set. Don't create PDF files from things, only have them available in forms that are directly consumable by users. That might be SQL dumps, it might be Excel files, CSV files, SD files, etc. So do that, and then you can also put code here. And again, this gets DOI'd and available and linkable. So here's an example of a data file. There were 203 views back then, and downloads of the data. People are taking the data away to reuse it. I have a personal data sharing version of Figshare, so it came with me to EPA. I still have it. My ORCID ID is on it. I just edit when I intend to stay at EPA, hopefully till the end of my career. I think it's a wonderful place to work. This is an example of me changing my connection to the affiliation I'm with. I change my profile here as necessary. And when I joined, I can't see when this was grabbed, but I already had 128,000 views. I think this is about 2 years old, and 26,000 downloads off this site of my publications that were open access, my presentations, data sets, etc. So that's an awful lot of access for very little work, in my opinion, to upload this stuff. And I worked very closely with Andrew McCaffrey, who's my postdoc, and I immersed him in this world of social networking and data sharing to see how that worked out for him. And I'll give you some examples. Some of you may review publications. At this stage of my career, I've been reviewing articles for many years. And if you do it, it would be nice to get some credit for it in some way. So I use something called Publons. There's another one called Reviewer Credits. Publons allows you to put up there the journal that you've reviewed for. You can even add your entire text in there, even though it won't necessarily go public. Some journals will allow you to do open peer review. So when you register your your review, you can check the button that says open peer review, and that will be available. Remember, the authors will get to see it. They will know who you are. I think that's a great world of openness. I think we should do more of that. Many publications do not support open peer review, but you can still get credit for the reviews that you do. So in this case, you sign in. Notice there are Google, ORCID ID, and LinkedIn for sign in. So again, ORCID ID is now being used as the open ID linkage. This is an example, a couple of years old, of the metrics. So it shows you, I didn't go back all the way through before 2016 and add every review I'd ever done. I couldn't find them all, to be honest. But you can see here how reviews that I'm doing every month. They get statistics like review to publication ratio. These are the journals that I have reviewed for, and you can see those counts. And I think this is really, really good. You can also link this. Publons ID links to your LinkedIn. So the fact that you're a Publons user has you show up on LinkedIn. And it synchronizes all of your review activity directly back to your LinkedIn profile. So every time you review, the way this works is you get an email thanking you, you connect that directly to your Publons, excuse me. It automatically synchronizes to Orchid. So all of that comes together through the network. Altmetrics is the metrics that you were measured by today are things like citations, publications, where you publish. The reality of it is that we should be counted by other things, these alternative metrics, and that is how much code do you write? How much of your code might end up in the world and be used by other people? What about your presentations? What about your Twitter activity? What about how many people are talking about your science? These are alternative metrics. There is a manifesto about this that I encourage you to see. Slides will be available for you to use these links. And there are various sites that are trying to measure your impact. There is more than simply citations and articles. And this is Impact Story. Notice the URL uses your Orchid ID. It's got these achievements on the left. It says that I've got Wikitastic. I've got a mention in Wikipedia articles. I think I've got 4 or 5 Wikipedia mentions at this point for articles. Then all the activity on the right-hand side showing you for certain publications when people are talking about it on Mendeley, Twitter, Facebook, and that old thing that pretty much evaporated called Google+. And you can see the statistics across various channels. That's free. This is an example of, I have the top 100 publications. Again, this slide deck is pretty old at this point. I should go back and recount these. But the co-authors, it keeps that network in place for you. This is an example of one article that I was involved with, and it gives you the detail of how many people tweeted about it. 159 tweets in those days. Google+. Somebody reviewed the article on F1000. There were public peer reviews made, blog posts made. So all of that comes together. They pull the information automatically so you can see about your article. You may be seeing these colored donuts. They either show up in this form or they show up as these colored bars. This is also a measure of altmetric, and the coloration is telling you about who is talking about your articles. So commonly they're showing up directly on publications. This is saying that for this article that was picked up by 18 news outlets, blogged about, it's on Facebook pages and tweeted. So those counts, and that number right there, the higher the number, the higher the public profile through these alternative metrics. So I encouraged Andrew McCachran to publish his article and then use the social networks to spread the message. So in a month, he got 774 downloads and 66 people had shared it. It was also referenced in Wikipedia pages. He had this altmetric score. It was blogged, tweeted, Reddited, and there was a video made about it. And that happened in about a month. And I can tell you that those statistics for this particular article, which is about mass spectrometry and using non-targeted analysis, had higher downloads, shares, and accesses than the majority of all articles that come out of our center in a short period of time, because he did the work to encourage people to take a look, whereas many of the articles from CCTE, we publish excellent science. I would say that we can put more work into sharing that information. A couple of tweets is not sufficient. You need to put more work into it. And again, hundreds to thousands of hours, you might want to do it. You can also go to this dedicated page. It will show you the information in depth. So you can see here, if you use the altmetric bookmarklet, drop it onto the browser, click the link, and it will tell you what the tweets actually are. You can see Andrew's tweet here, my tweet here. Other people were talking about it, the publisher themselves, Chris Southern, who is a connection I have in Sweden. Then you can also click on these tabs and see what blogs said, what Wikipedia said, and what the video was. So this is all captured for you. As long as you have a DOI for the article, you can go directly to this bookmarklet and you can see the attention that you have had. When I give this talk in advance, to a larger audience, I ask for people to send me DOIs, and I show them their statistics. And in one case, there was a person in the audience who had no idea about how much of a following their article had gotten. And they had something like an altmetric score of 350. They had no idea that the news media had been talking about it. It came as a shock. So it's worth following your information. This is my Google Scholar publications. This is where I manage everything directly for my citations again, in order to get me citation counts. The Google Sheet that I have is where I keep all the DOIs. This is where the citations all come together as managed by Google. And again, don't forget, add your ORCID ID so that they can find you. But do manage it. So I don't know these co-authors at all. I didn't recognize them. And it is immediately indicative to me that I should go check my profile. And certainly there's an Antony Williams. The only thing I know about sleep apnea is I don't have it. I sleep well, and no issues for me. I don't do lung function, etc., etc. So, and I also wasn't born at a period in 1766. My pros would not show up. So how Google even mapped that to my activities is beyond me. So be careful. And I'm from Wales originally. You might tell something from my accent. And I thought originally this was sheep health in New South Wales, and they'd figured something out, but indeed it's not. So all you do is you go and you click delete and you remove it from your account. You can also add articles that have been missed, and I encourage you to do that. Google is extremely good now at mapping my articles automatically. Twitter is something I do. I do put up links to my publications, my presentations on SlideShare. I do work to make sure that people know what's been released from the lab. I help my colleagues to get people directed to their articles. 140, of course, has grown now. It's doubled. I have chosen Chem Connector as a brand name. I've kept that for years now. I think of my role as connecting people to chemistry, to chemical compounds, to chemical websites, to software, etc., etc. So I've maintained that brand, and it works very well for me. The greatest information for me, value, is actually leading people to what I do. Then it gets amplified, and below is an example. 35,000 impressions of what I've tweeted and connected back to what I've done in a week. So that's an awful lot of potential traffic. I've also used it to wake up old articles, and have proven that things that I published 10 years ago, I can get altmetric scores, I can drive attention, I can bring things back up. So it is good for awakening old articles. I also have a number of book chapters. I have the possibility of using, well, all of you have the possibility of using Amazon profiles. So I set up my own profile. I've published 6 books. There are multiple chapters in these, so I've added this account for myself. You can see everything I've done on Amazon, and my Twitter account is linked directly to this also. So everything I tweet gets connected to this profile. All free, of course. Facebook, nothing personal, but I probably will not make friends with you on Facebook because it's for friends and family. I have 2 kids. I ride a motorbike. I have a crazy exercise life. I get hurt a lot. Age, mostly. And I like to share that with my friends and family, but it's not really for scientists. The only thing that I share there, for some of my scientist friends, I will share blog posts, links to papers, etc. So I would do that if you have a Facebook, but I wouldn't make it public personally. It's for my private crazy activities. But this is an example of how I do it. Just simply share the link from SlideShare, and it will automatically populate it. And it shows up. The presentation on SlideShare will show up on Facebook. As I said, I am Chem Connector, and I developed a big enough profile over the years because of the social network that I built, because of the number of things I've done, and it took work. I can tell you, I got on the train fairly early, so there's a lot more noise in the social networks than when I joined. But in the early days, I was able to build a profile, and so I get this special page for the blog. I don't blog much at all anymore. The only things I put on my blog are actually, I embed my presentations from SlideShare. Occasionally I do an April 1st joke that have skilled scientists asking me how I did that. Always fun to mess with scientists, and things like that. I don't write about all the craziness that I see. This is what it looks like. This is an example of an ACS presentation embedded directly. And when things get counted here, when people visit my blog to look at the link, the SlideShare deck, the statistics all automatically count into the SlideShare statistics. And at the bottom is a link in the red here is the link to the same presentation on Figshare, which I used to do a lot. I don't have time. This is the top of my CV. It's a list of links. And while my CV can be read, if you want to see everything about me, you may as well just click there, because that's everything I've got. It's always updated. So my blog, camconnected.com, my complete CV, which does go out of date and I have to update it. My citations, Google is automatically filling it. My LinkedIn profile, 2 hours a month across your profiles, and that will always be up to date. Impact story, that's automatically updating with altmetrics. My SlideShare profile, every time I put a presentation, then that refreshes. My Wikipedia page, people say interesting things, and I can't, because you can't author your own Wikipedia page. Amazon authors, this is where I add my book chapters, and then this is my Publons profile, which these links all keep updated. So it's a benefit to putting that in your CV. For those inside EPA, you may or may not know, but you already have a page that does a lot of this for you. Vivo is there for you to use, and I believe it's vivo.epa.gov. When you join EPA, they give you a Vivo page. Your articles should be pulling into it if you have got your ORCID ID on it, because they use ORCID to do that. Your altmetrics, which I showed you in the donuts, should be auto-populating. That is done for you. You don't need to think about it. You do have the ability to edit your profile, and I can't recall if your photograph shows up by default. Probably not, but you can add it yourself. And then these are links to my profiles that I added. So this is SlideShare, Google+, Kudos, LinkedIn, Mendeley, Publons, Amazon, Google, ORCID, etc., etc. So that you can add for yourself, and it brings it all into one place. And then look, you have your overview, your background, which you can edit, your affiliation, presentations, etc., etc. All of it can be managed directly inside EPA. So it's like drinking from a fire hose. There is so much more I could show you. I could show you things like grow kudos and dimensions. If people want to know more about that, I recommend you read the F1000 article. I do think these are all worth doing for you as early stage career researchers. I've given this talk across the world in many different countries at this point. Some flavor of this. This is out of date. Sorry, this is a recent one. And when a room is full of people late in their career, they shrug. They don't see it. Well, that's great when you're already professor or head chair of a department, but you're not. Most of you are not in that wonderful position. So you need to figure out what can you do to elevate the signal that you have in the world above the noise of everybody else trying to do the same. So consider it that way. This is an opportunity for you to build your own profile, manage it, prune it, and educate others as to what you're up to. I encourage you to do it. I guarantee it will have benefits if you do. I have seen it for so many people at this point. Certainly postdocs I've worked with at EPA. So register for an ORCID ID. I would enhance your LinkedIn profile. If you haven't put 8 to 12 hours into your profile, I encourage you to do it. I judge that you probably have enough information that you can make that a great place, first visit place. And that would include putting data and presentations in other places and then connecting them back to LinkedIn. Curate and manage your Google Scholar citations. You may have a couple of presentations at this point, and they may be at an ACS conference. Those presentations at ACS do get indexed into Google Scholar citations. Choose ResearchGate or academia. It's totally up to you. I prefer ResearchGate myself, and use Publons if you do review. And truly, it's worth participating. So this is what I said in a Nature article that was about looking at a platform called Kudos. I did not have time to cover that today. And this is what I said. This is so choose 2 or 3, 2 hours a month, keep them current, update an ORCID ID, claim and update it, and do things on PubMed. It hasn't changed for me. It's what I'm doing. I'm putting in a few hours of work to get the message out. I said 10 to 20 hours of work. I think you can do it in less, but the more work you put in, the better. As I said, various versions of this talk are online at SlideShare. My email is there, and I will answer any questions if anything's come in.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much. I realized that we were all on mute here, so you couldn't probably hear my cackling when you talked about 6 people thinking you're a horse, saddle up. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the information. We've got some time here for everyone to answer some questions. I have a couple questions. We have one question in the Q&A right now that came in. And so, yeah, for everybody there, I think Roz is going to unlock the chat, so you can use that if you'd like. And then also feel free to type in the Q&A. And so, Antony, maybe you might be able to see this question in the Q&A as well. So let's see what we got here. So,
so I'm reading it right now. So there's 2, Brenna, both of them. Okay, so should I read this out so other people can see it?
Feel free. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So Brenna's comment was, thanks for the presentation. It's a bit overwhelming to start and maintain. What do you think is the single most important online profile to work on if you feel like you have limited time? And if you're worried you won't be able to keep it up, is it better not to start? You mentioned that HR will view LinkedIn, so is it better to not even have one rather than have a bad one? Whew, that's a good question. I would say that LinkedIn is the first place that HR is going to go to. I think it's better to have one than not have one. But if I didn't say this. Do not put a photograph of you up standing on a beach in your swim shorts or bikini for a girl. Don't do that. Make sure it's a good headshot, or at least somebody has taken a shot of you in a fairly professional environment. Some people put things of them climbing mountains. That's different. That's a hobbyist thing. But make sure that you choose something appropriate. I would say if you're going to have LinkedIn, at least take a couple of hours. It's as long as it takes to watch a movie on Netflix. I watched a bad movie with my kids last night, but commonly I'm working while I'm doing it. It's low energy level to populate this information. So I would say LinkedIn for sure. It's where people are going. So the next question, what do you do if you have a career transition and previous work is no longer relevant? You have a period while you were pursuing new skills for that transition. How do you account for lack of productivity? You can keep in your profile that for a period of time that what that role was, and you could say from 2016 to 2018, stay-at-home mom. Let's be honest, we're all at home now and keeping house and being stay-at-home mom. It's a profession, for goodness sake. It's so demanding of us. There's no reason to say that. And if you went off and traveled the world, just say world traveler and experienced in the world. There's no downside to taking a break and saying that. And then Brenna's asking another question. What are your thoughts on sharing information about work you do outside of your day job on your profile? I do climate change advocacy that includes public presentations outside my research area, not affiliated with my job. Do you recommend keeping your passion projects separate from your work profile? If that is your passion project, I would say put that on there. To go out of your way to do things like climate change advocacy work, that could be incredibly beneficial for the right person who's coming to read your profile. If you have public presentations, make them public directly. Post them on SlideShare, embed them directly in your LinkedIn profile. Because with one click, you can share them directly into your LinkedIn profile and you can see them all. I think on my profile now, I have about 90 of my presentations that are on SlideShare LinkedIn. I would not keep them separate, especially that one. If your passion project is doing Spartan races, you know, list that in your hobbies. And that's the end of the questions that I've got so far.
So, so I have a question for you, and it's sort of related to what Brenna asked first, and it was, yeah, if you're not able to keep up with a particular platform, would it be better to go through? So you were saying, you know, like, I'm sure you've tried some different ones throughout the years, and they get maintained or they don't get maintained. Have you gone through and just deactivated any of these ones that you know you're not updating anymore, or do you just have you left it going? Like, yeah.
So it's a great question. I pretty much put things on my calendar so that about every 90 days, I will take a couple of evenings to update profiles that I care about. So,
okay.
I'm trying to think of the next ones that I will do. I will go to Kudos. GrowKudos.com is a site that I use to tell stories about my papers. So let's assume that I release a publication and the media pick up on it, or I write a blog post on it, or we release a data set about it. Post-publication, Kudos, Grow Kudos, or Kudos.com. Kudos is the website, Grow Kudos is the .com address. I will add post-publication information about that article. And I do it about 90 days after I've released. So if it's on Wikipedia, I will point to that. It's a real way to keep an article alive. And it can go on for years. So as an example, I published an article on a chemical called Olympocene. It's a chemical that looks like the Olympic rings. And it's actually gone on for people who have synthesized it. And there are more publications about that than any other chemical I've ever been involved with, because it turns out to be beneficial to potentially improving lithium-ion batteries. And as more research happens, I add it to my article from years ago. It's a great way to do that.
Cool. Cool.
Molly has a question. Oh, Dan has a question. What would you suggest to do with presentations that aren't heavy on text and words? We typically try to make presentations that are heavy on graphics, explain them orally while presenting. Would you recommend writing a script outline and including it with the presentation, or is it useful to just include the presentation as is? So SlideShare will take the text directly from the slides. I do not believe it includes the notes. For those cases, I try to use enough text so that they are fairly self-explanatory, because I know where I'm going to put it. I love presentations that are heavy in graphics. When I do those, I use a piece of software called Snagit. I will put up my PowerPoint presentation and I will present to myself while I record it. I hit one button and it puts it onto YouTube, and then I will post YouTube to Twitter. I will post it onto SlideShare directly as a video. So I would record for yourself and post it. Then you have a video also. And then I would also take the presentation on the second slide. I would put a link into that YouTube video. So if you put the presentation up on SlideShare, the second slide will tell them where the YouTube is. They can then download your slides, plus they can watch the video that you've given. I've done it a number of times. It works really well. Molly is asking, most of what you discussed is communicating and marketing your research to other scientists. Many scientists use Twitter or other platforms to help translate their research to a lay audience and contribute to educating the public. Do you think it's important for researchers and for career development? And how is the best way to go about that without letting it consume your time for research? I've done a lot of translation of our research, deep research, into communications to a lay audience. I've done it. It takes effort. It's easier for me to talk science to scientists than it is to convert it into a form for the lay person. But I can do it. I tend to keep things to 5 to 10 minutes. I polish a presentation way more than I would do if I'm standing in front of 50 or 60 scientists at ACS. I think it is definitely worth doing it. And it's essentially your little stub speech for the work that you're doing, so that you can tell mom, dad, aunts, uncles about what you're doing. My mom still is confused by the depth of what I do, but she knows I used to use big magnets for looking at chemicals to try and figure out. And today my job is to share data with the world so that we can understand chemicals in the environment and use them for human health research. Those words are enough to communicate to the community. It's worth doing.
I guess maybe we'll take one final call for questions here and then let you off the hook. Let's see. I know I had one other question for you too, which you sort of again answered, which was related to YouTube basically. And so I've seen some functionality where you can just send this stuff up to YouTube. And so like SlideShare is not something that I've used previously, but I've put some of my slideshows up on YouTube. And I think there's something built into Microsoft PowerPoint where you can just click and it publishes it to a YouTube channel for you automatically. So I was curious to hear about like SlideShare versus YouTube, or if it's just both, or yeah, if you had experience or preference or anything like that.
I use SlideShare specifically because it was one of the first platforms to come up, and I ended up with so many presentations on there that to leave it when I'd built up a profile there would have been wasteful. I like SlideShare a lot because it's single button click directly into LinkedIn. That is beneficial. Those two are on the same. They're the same. Microsoft. The platforms are so interconnected. Definitely put stuff up on YouTube. I have slide decks there. I have videos there, and of late I have COVID-19 karaoke videos there. So it's a very powerful channel. It just depends on where you want to put your work really. Google search will index it very, very well on their own side.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can call this thing a wrap here. Thank you very much for taking your time to share this stuff with us. As you said, we'll make everything that you've got here available to the group here. Super important for all of us that are getting started on our careers to get some advice for how we can sort of promote and share this. And now we've got so much time with our computer, so why not?
Yep.
Anyway.
So people can go to SlideShare and grab versions of this talk. I can put this there, and Nate, I can also send it to you directly if you would like to put it somewhere else for people. It's all open.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for everyone's time. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks. And then before people leave, I just wanted to ask a reminder that we have a panel discussion on science communication tomorrow at 2:30, which you can register for with us. And there's also going to be a forum next week on Wednesday, the 6th of May at 2:30 with Sherilyn and Colin, who are two people from the main campus med school and graduate school. So they're going to talk to us about kind of what we've been getting up to during COVID-19. But yeah, so we'll send out email reminders to everyone about that.
All right. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.